Thank you for joining us this afternoon, Marty, in
Certainly.
the studio. Topic on the board today is one that we get a lot of questions about, both from members and non-members. And so we've titled this The Legal Considerations When Selecting Self-Defense Ammunition. It's a topic on which you have a depth of experience, both as an expert and in other aspects of your life. And why don't you start out by telling us how you began studying the question about ammunition for self-defense?
In 1990, I was a fledgling firearms instructor, and I traveled all the way back to Concord, New Hampshire from the rural environs of Washington State to attend the Lethal Force Institute. And during that time, we would go back to the office after class, and we could choose all kinds of cool stuff that they had to buy there. And one of them was Corbon ammunition. Now, I had heard Mass talk about Corbon and why he was using it. And I happened to be using 9mm self-defense pistol at the time. And I was happy to get my hands on some. And Corbon was really the first of the specialty hot self-defense ammunition. As time goes on, Corbon became more popular, and I ended up actually purchasing a distributorship for Corbon. That was done to supplement my early training school, Firearms Academy of Seattle, and so between running the school and selling Corbon ammunition, I was able to make a living. But about that same time, Corbon started getting some play in the press, most notably by Evan Marshall. And Evan had a theory that if a high velocity handgun ammunition was used with a hollow point that expanded reliably, it would result in better one-shot stops. And Evan spent probably 20 years of his life working on this theory and collecting data, and turns out that I think he's right. And so I became fairly successful selling Corbon ammunition. And of course, to sell it, I needed to study it. And so I basically got involved in the ground floor of the bullet wars. At the same time, there was another aspect of it where slow and heavy with a lot of penetration was supposed to be the key to stopping power. And so for several years, those two sides warred over each other, which is why we called it the bullet wars. And so while the sides have pretty much come together, we may even talk about this later on, pretty much come together, the fact of the matter is I learned an awful lot about selecting handgun ammunition.
Where did Ed Sanow come into that? Because he was an associate of Evans that got a lot of magazine bylines along those lines also. Is that anything that's in your memory? I'd hate to give Ed short shrift.
That's true. Actually, Evan and Ed worked together on their book projects. And I don't know exactly who did what. I think Ed did a lot of the production, the writing, the photography, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Evan did the collecting of the
science,
the statistics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was an interesting time, and I don't think the war is too strong of a word for it, because the Facklerites and the Jello shooters were definitely squaring off against each other.
Don't forget the morgue monsters.
Well, I thought that was what Evan was.
Yeah, but you forgot to say.
I see.
The
okay.
morgue monster.
You just wanted to say
the morgue monster being the people who go in and study what the bullets did to the bodies at the morgue during autopsy.
Well, and Evan being a lifetime homicide cop, it's really not that gruesome. He would have.
He had to go to the autopsies and study them anyway.
He might as well learn some extra things. So, and I think that some of the things that we were looking for as students of that material were questions Well, I mean, we use the word effectiveness, and I don't think that Evan was selling the idea that there was one bullet that if you shot a guy one time it would stop all hostilities, but that was a term that got coined, and indeed we know from court cases and life in general that the more times that you shoot a person until the hostilities stop, the more exposed you are in terms of charges that what you did wasn't right. But there's other questions that came into the bullet wars. Penetration, how deep is deep enough and how much is too much? How much recoil is there? If you live in an apartment, is it going to go through the walls? And those are all things that I think even today...
Which, by the way, the answer is yes.
to all of those.
Any bullet's going to go through the walls in an apartment.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I also think, and I mean, and then we had the days of Joe Zambone with the fragmented ammunition and the birdshot, and I mean, people have been trying most
MagSafe.
Yes, most of my adult life and most of my involvement in the firearms industry to look for that magic bullet, and of course there is no magic bullet. Frankly, it's probably more shot placement than the performance of the bullet anyway, but it really spawns a lot of questions, and people would in many ways like someone to just tell them, carry 124 grain gold dot and don't look back. But I think that kind of surface study leaves us with a lot of questions. So when you are choosing self-defense ammunition to carry, what are your priorities?
Oh, first of all, I'm going to correct them. There is a magic bullet.
There's a magic bullet.
Yes, it's a federal 125 grain semi-jacketed hollow point bullet, which is right there. And that is the #1 cartridge and bullet configuration due to Evan Marshall's study of one-shot stopping.
Thank you, Evan. We'll get a picture of Evan and flash him up on the screen.
There you go. The concept behind Evan's study was if a person was shot once in the torso and once only, how long did they continue to be viable? And Evan came up with the fact that after studying, I'm not going to say hundreds, but tens, 20, 30, 40 of these, over 90% of the time, if a law enforcement officer shot someone with a federal 125 grain semi-jacketed hollow point bullet, they stopped right now. And so that is the magic bullet. And interestingly, I still carry it when I'm carrying a revolver.
Mm-hmm. Few of us carry revolvers anymore, which causes us to open up our field of inquiry quite a bit. So I say again, making those choices, what priorities do you put in what order?
Well, if a person is going to use a handgun for self-defense, they have to be aware of a lot of different considerations.
Okay.
Of course, the bullet must be reasonably effective if placed in a reasonably effective place to put the bullet.
Right.
And according to Dr. James Williams, the originator of tactical anatomy, which I actually went and became one of his instructors last year, he is saying that if you can shoot someone basically right here and maybe a 3-inch wide strip up to here, then you're going to stop them right now. And I buy that.
With a 22?
With anything.
Okay.
Maybe not as often as with the 22, but still, that's what we need to be looking for when we go to use a gun in self-defense. Because why are you using a gun in self-defense?
Because he's trying to kill me.
Or, for whatever reason, you need to stop that action right now. Maybe he's trying to kill somebody else.
Sure.
Maybe it's a bank teller and he's threatening the bank teller with his finger on the trigger of his cocked .45. Okay. And you need to stop him right now. or he's going to start shooting people. And so if you can put one in that area right there, or into the side of the head, basically at the location of the ear, where it goes in through the middle of the head, then that's going to pretty much always stop the fight.
So as the real estate agent said, location, location, location.
Yeah, and I like to stress that training and competency and skill with your defensive handgun is much more important than the type of bullets you're choosing for self-defense.
Well, that's true, but when people ask me the question, what shall I carry for self-defense, they're not going to be real happy if I say that. So, after shot placement...
If they ask me, I don't care if they're going to be real happy. I'm going to tell them,
shot placement, what comes next?
well, after shot placement, then what comes next is the bullet going to stay in the human body?
Talk to us about that.
I don't want the bullets going through the human bodies and continuing on to injure other people.
Over penetration.
Over penetration. And one side of the debate is, oh, it's got to penetrate 18 inches. Well, you know, there are a lot of people that aren't 18 inches thick. And so if you're using bullets that will penetrate 18 inches, you may end up having shot someone behind the person that you try to stop. And of course, the other thing is, well, I wouldn't have taken the shot. Well, then somebody else may have died if you didn't take that shot.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for something that's a bullet that is going to stop inside pretty much any human body that that I would likely shoot. Now, that means penetration using the FBI protocols, the gelatin tests. The bullets should penetrate no more than 12 inches or so.
Okay.
And that's going to go against the grain of a lot of people. But you know, they can produce videos that say something different. If you get one that will penetrate about 12 inches in gelatin, then that bullet will likely stop inside the human body 100% of the time. It may not penetrate even 12 inches inside the human body. But unless you shoot someone through the tip of the shoulder down into ear, you may not have to penetrate that much. Now, your heart is only 5-6 inches deep. Yeah. And that's what I want to be using. And so, and I think most knowledgeable instructors would primarily agree with that. They may want a little bit deeper penetration, but they usually don't have to defend the people in court.
Well, and you have.
I have.
Yes, you have. Before we get
just to clear that up, though, not as an attorney, but working as an expert. So
before we go down that road, one of the questions that comes up, because costs have really risen, and when I was a young puppy in this study, we were being told crazy stuff like 500 rounds through of your carry ammunition through your gun before you trust your life with it. And even then, I don't know how much money you were making. I wasn't not sure I was making enough money to buy a case of Corbon hollow points in those days. That was expensive stuff. Now, of course, ammunition is probably 4 times higher, 5 times higher than it was back then. But the mind boggles. I don't think economically we're able to do that. Has that requirement, if indeed it ever was a requirement, has that suggestion changed?
Oh, it depends on who was making the suggestion, of course. I'd never keyed into that. I just wanted to make sure that ammunition that I was choosing was going to work reliably in my handgun. And the key is choosing the correct handguns to pretty much feed all the ammunition that's out there. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's not just all about the bullet. Well, going then to the nitty gritty, when you were defending or part of the defense teams and the question of ammunition came up. I know that I would see you getting boxes of the same ammunition, sometimes from the defense attorney or the police evidence, and firing that and doing testing with it. What were you trying to determine?
Okay, just wanted to clear up one other thought. You asked what ammunition I wanted to use, and I was talking about penetration. And but I also want it to be a full power load. You know, something, you know, usually it's called plus P. If it's a 38 special, I want it to be a plus P 38 special. Any of the 9mm, 40, 45, I want it to be a plus P, because the hotter the round is, the less likely it's going to penetrate deeper than what I want. And so that's part of the criteria there. I also want it to have a good track record. I want to know that it's been used in other shootings, that police departments are happy with it, that kind of thing. I want it to be of a major ammunition manufacturer, like Federal or Winchester or Spear, one of these companies that make hundreds of thousands of rounds. Or if you can't find that, then I want it to be with the manufacturer that you know personally, who would come to court and testify about his ammunition. For example, when I was working closely with Peter Pye from Corbon, I knew that if I needed to, I could call him into court and he could explain to the jury about his ammunition and why it is good ammunition for self-defense. Corbon has since gone through 2 or 3 changes of owners. I don't know the people involved there now, and so I'm no longer using Corbon. But when I started carrying a 10mm, I looked around and there ain't crap for 10mm ammunition out there, except for Supervel.
There's an old name.
Supervel was a boutique manufacturer from the late 70s and 1980s. They went out of business for many years. Then one of the luminaries in the industry, Cameron Hopkins, purchased the business, and he's been running it for about 15 years now.
But yeah, Cameron ended up with it, and he's saved it. He saved an old line. Famous.
And I know that the guy does quality ammunition. I could call him up right now and say, Cameron, Marty Hayes here, I need some help on a case. And he would do whatever he needed, whatever I needed. Whether that's ship me some ammunition for testing, or write up something about the ammunition, or even go to court. So if it's a boutique manufacturer, then I want to make sure that they're going to be there if I need them for court. Of course, I look at everything now through the lens of what's going to happen in court. So.
Well, people asking us those questions, I think that they're asking that, and the only thing I would add then is, for the boutique manufacturer, you may meet that person at the SHOT Show or at a major gun show, and so it's probably not that far-fetched. But for mere mortals, if we aren't going to be moving in those orbits, then I think that puts us into the Spear, Federal, Winchester, the major manufacturers where there's some presumption, and maybe we follow the market a little bit to be making an idea that they will be there in years to come.
Follow the teachings of Dr. James Williams. He's been doing a lot of research in ammunition. Chuck Haggard, he's been kind of took the mantle of doing the ammunition testing. He's come up with some pretty good recommendations. Somebody else, Greg Elifitz, was doing some writing on the subject. But
your instructors may be able to help you with that. You're really not out in the desert on your own, but it also may not be the kind of question where we can say, hey, Marty, I carry I carry a 32 H&R. What ammunition shall I get for it? You know, it's not, I think, the kind of thing where you can just go to someone else and say, tell me what to do.
Yeah.
I don't think it works that way. Well, let's see. Talk to us then about what you mentioned a few minutes ago, that you see it through the veil of the courtroom procedure. What
Yeah.
concerns do you have as specifically applies to ammunition performance and what it does?
Since the 1990s, I've been working as an expert in self-defense cases and sometimes on murder or manslaughter cases. And I've looked at a lot of autopsy reports. I've done a lot of testing on bullets and then taking those tests and deciding how they fit into this particular case I'm looking at. When you're looking at a court case, you want to be able to replicate the forensics, the physical evidence, the gunshot residue, the stippling. You want to be able to look at the pictures in the police reports, in the autopsy reports, and take, so let's say, for instance, a stippling pattern, which would be unburnt flakes of gunpowder sticking into the skin or into the clothing of an individual. This is a shirt from a test court case that I was working on, and it shows me firing at a white t-shirt cloth at 3 inches, 6 inches, 9 inches, and 12 inches. And what you can see is a very circular dark area here with even more circular area here. This little area would be soot, and this would be a lighter shade of soot, the gunshot residue. And then you see a little lighter soot pattern here. By here you're getting into very little soot here and very little soot here. And the stippling is just a bunch of little tiny pinpoints. It's also called tattooing. So in this particular case, the 3-inch pattern was most closely compared to a gunshot on a hat from a deceased subject. Let's go ahead and put that one. Okay, as you can see in the photograph here, this is a photograph of a ball cap, and it's got a entrance wound or an entrance hole right here and a bunch of soot around here, gunshot residue, soot, and that picture most closely aligns with the one that I did the testing on that showed 3 inches. So I was able to testify in court that the gunshot that produced this hole happened approximately 3 inches away. You've got to be able to have the same type of ammunition that was used in the incident. Ammunition can vary wildly. And I'm going to take you to another picture, or another slide where out of one of my books, it shows 2 different testings at the same distance, using the same gun, but simply different ammunition. Here it says, powder pattern with factory 38 special cartridge loaded with ball powder here, and disc flake powder here. These powder patterns were produced with the same Colt revolver at the same standoff distance of 6 inches with 2 different loads of 125 grain jacket hollow point Remington 38 special ammunition. One containing 18 grain charges of spherical ball powder, and the other containing 5 to 5.5 grain charges of unperforated disc flake powder. These cartridges produce comparable muzzle velocities, but as shown, produce very different powder patterns. And let me just explain now why it's so important that your ammunition, what you used in your handgun, can be replicated. So in order for an expert to go into court and testify to, say, a distance of a shot, they have to be able to tell the jury, through the judge, that yes, you used the same ammunition or something very, very similar, because good attorneys know that different ammunition, different powder charges can produce wildly different results. And in order for evidence to be admitted into court, it must be reasonably, it must adhere to basic scientific standards. It must be replicable, and you've got to be able to basically replicate what the ammunition you were using. And so that is what we're trying to accomplish. It's also one of the reasons why we don't use reloads for self-defense. You're the ammunition manufacturer if you stuff your own 38 special cartridges and cap it off with a bullet. And how is an expert going to replicate that in court or that for court? Not going to be able to. And so it's likely that his tests, which may have been perfectly valid, would not be allowed into court. And if they were not allowed into court, then you may be convicted. In fact, I'm working on a review of a case right now where the medical examiner said there was stippling on the wound area, but there was no other testing done. And so we don't know exactly how far the muzzle was from the wound. There was no testing done with that gun, that particular type of ammunition, compared to the study of the stippling pattern on the deceased. And so this individual was convicted. They may be perfectly innocent. We've got to be able to do this. You can't use your hand loads for self-defense. This is the primary reason for that.
Well, to your point, I mean, there's certainly load books, that talk about how many grains of Hodgkin's or whatever specific powder, and there certainly people who always use the same brand of bullet or that type of thing. But then, really, I suppose the question is the reliability of you saying, well, I know it was the load that was spelled out on page 9 of my bound book. I know it was that one. At that point, is it more that it's your word is at question there, because you certainly might know the recipe that you built.
Yeah, I pretty much know all the recipes that I load for handgun ammunition, but that's just your word as far as what was being used, and you want the third independent word to come in and say that this is what happened here. And now, just for professional sake, let's hit the next slide up there, which shows the cover of Shooting Incident Reconstruction, Michael Haig and Lucian Haig. This is the Bible, and there's a bunch of other ones too, but this is what I took that photograph and wording out of. I just wanted to give them
Credit to
professional attribution.
What it impresses me with is how important that post-shooting investigation is, and something that you've said to us in the studio before is, in some of your small rural departments, gosh, you may not get that highly professional investigator, and what that takes my mind to is, my goodness, then your defense attorney needs to be Johnny on the spot, getting an expert like you or someone who has done those studies to make that independent investigation at least, because it seems to me that there's enormous questions that the evidence can answer, but what if the evidence isn't preserved?
Then you take your best shot and you make the prosecution look stupid for not preserving the evidence that they should have preserved.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times I've done that in court, try to explain that no, you don't put Campbell's soup cans into the crime scene and photograph where a shell casing is. You identify it by a marker, and one case I had, and that case actually turned out okay for the defense, but
Yeah, and I don't think that there's any maliciousness in wanting to make them look poor, but it is a serious thing if you're going to go to the penitentiary or you're going to be understood to have acted in self-defense. When we're doing those choices and we say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and spend the money, I'm going to buy a commercially recognized load, and the old advice used to be, well, find out what your local police department carries, and it just feel like today we really don't have those kinds of relationships with our officers who may not really be gun guys or gun gals anyway. But talk to us a little bit about naming protocols. I mean, there's been some things even by large ammunition manufacturers that have not looked particularly good. How sensitive are you to the branding?
I'm reminded of Winchester coming out with their black Talon
I was thinking
ammunition.
about that. Yeah, I know.
Oh my God.
I know.
And
Yeah.
those white cops are using black Talon ammunition to shoot black guys on the street, and it killed that brand. Just that stupid name killed an otherwise very good brand of ammunition.
A bullet design, yes.
There's another one here from Dynamic Research Technologies that I am aware of. In fact, they produce a very high quality frangible ammunition. And I looked into carrying that for a while in my 10 millimeter because they actually produce some good quality 10 millimeter ammunition. The problem is they named it DRT. And what does DRT stand for in our little subworld?
Yeah. Well, or when we're texting, he's dead right there.
Dead right there.
Yeah.
And I couldn't open myself up to that criticism. The other problem with that, and with any frangible ammunition, is how do you look at a frangible bullet path inside a body? You don't, because there is no bullet path. When I do a shooting incident reconstruction, one of the major issues is where did the bullets enter the body and what path did they take before they stopped. And I do this with probably half the cases that I work on. And it confirms or disputes what I'm being told as far as what the dead person was doing. For example, let's use this thing. If this is a human body and the bullet path is straight through the body, then you can pretty much figure the gun was right there, shot horizontal. But if the bullet path is like this, then you can say that the gun was up here. But what if the gun wasn't up there logically? Then this is how it occurred.
Yeah.
The guy was leaning forward. And so that's a critical analysis of one instance that I'm looking at. And so you need to be able to determine the path that the bullets take once they hit the body, because that will tell you where the gun was, where the shooter was, and how the bullets came in to strike the body.
Right.
What was the person doing? Were they leaning forward? Were they standing erect? And then one of the issues is, how do you explain the bullets in the back? And we know from testing and research through the Force Science Research Center that a person can spin and turn in a quarter to a half a second. Well, how long does it take a person to fire more than one shot? If you're shooting rapidly, it takes about a quarter of a second between shots. So use your finger gun. Okay, and when I say now, go bang, 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 okay? Ready? Now.
Bang, bang, bang.
You just shot me in the back.
3 shots. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and that was pretty fast shooting. And so a lot of people are prosecuted for shooting in the back when they shouldn't have been prosecuted, because the shooting started facing the front, and as the shots hit, bang, 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 and then the person stopped shooting.
Yeah.
We need to be able to tell that from the bullet path through the body. And that means not frangible ammunition. I'm sorry, you guys, a lot of this stuff is really great stuff, but I can't use it myself. The only time I would use it would be if I had a consideration where I'd want to make sure it didn't penetrate through interior, exterior walls in a house.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I said when we started, there's a lot to this, and I think that that's why you can't just go to an expert and say, tell me what to carry, because what do they know about your personal circumstances? It really does become an individual choice that requires some study. Do you have any favorite resources, given that most people are probably not going to drop $59.95 on shooting incident reconstruction or get through it? Any favorite resources
They could drop,
might turn to?
They could drop $1,000 and go to one of Dr. Williams' courses. In fact, he is certifying instructors to bring his knowledge out to the general public, and you could search out one of his instructors and take a course, and they're not
That would be real good. Yeah,
you know, and learn the stuff, and they're going to have ammunition recommendations in those courses.
What's the bottom line for us? What do you want us to take away from this?
Training. You need to be trained well enough that under extreme stress, you can put bullets right here. That you don't, shooting all over the place. And that's really the bottom line.
Okay.
All of the good, reputable handgun ammunition will do just fine if you hit them right here.
There you go.
And so that's really the bottom line. If you're not trained that well, get some frickin' training. This is serious stuff.
Yes.
I don't want to hear of one of our members shooting him in the leg and shooting him in the gut and shooting him in the shoulder in a defensive shooting. I remember it says, oh my God. We'll help you out, but you could have really helped yourself out by being a better shot. And that's really the bottom line for me.
Okay. Good enough. Well, thank you for coming in here today and sharing your experience as an expert and where that knowledge comes from. It's a subject people love to argue about. The bullet wars go on in the private homes and shooting clubs and gun stores. And I think that knowing that it's not just about one aspect of it, that it's a multifaceted study is something that that takes it out of a fun discussion to have into a serious study that we need to each determine for ourselves.
For me, thanks to Evan Marshall and Ed Sandow and
Evan is a great guy.
Jim Cirillo, Masada Youb, John Farnham, all the people I've studied with that really helped me learn and understand this topic.
Yeah, it took you into your role as an expert, got you into those classes, whether it's force science classes, the death investigation classes, so on, and gave you that foundation. Well, that's great. We stand on the shoulders of giants. There's no doubt about that. All right. Well, thank you, folks. I hope this has been useful to you. Thank you, Marty. I think it's a wrap.